Thanks everyone for joining. Emily and Jamil, I've made you co-hosts. Connor, I think is gonna get us started with an intro.
I am. Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Manis. Welcome to Breakout Session A. The presenters of Part 1 of this session are the presenters. Oopsies, I just read backwards. The presenters of Part 1 of this session are Emily Cole and Jamil Muhammad, Hakeem Leonard, and Nadira Mayweather. Emily will explore the importance of leading with authenticity, utilizing civility principles, and leading with accountability. Jamil will explore potential blind spots in leadership to help us identify our own leadership. During part 2 of this breakout session, Hakeem Leonard will discuss empathy as both an action for everyday living and transformative pedagogy. Last, Nadira will discuss the power of collaboration by incorporating the 3 L's, language choice, listening, and love, into spoken and written word as a framework for building a more inclusive community.
Okay, so I will go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Cole. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. All right. Can you wave if you can see the screen? Can everyone see it? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk to you today about civility and authenticity in leadership. I'm very honored to be here today. I'm the Chief Development Officer with Lifting as We Climb. We are a Black-owned educational consulting firm, and we specialize in anti-bias, anti-racism practices, trainings, and teachings. We work at schools, communities, private organizations, and directly with parents and students. And we like to broadly define an educator as anyone who shapes the minds of young people. That's anyone involved, a teacher, a coach, a sibling, a parent, a counselor, a business owner, or a friend. I'm a Shepherd alum, so it's a special honor to be here with you today. So I'm going to talk about civility and authenticity in leadership. I'm really looking forward to just contributing to this conversation. Leadership is a skill, it's a lifestyle, and it's not a job title. Anyone can be a leader in the right conditions. And as you all know, we move in and out of leadership roles every day, just depending on the setting that we're in. The 2 pillars of leadership I'd like to talk about are leading with accountability and engaging in your leadership courageously. So I just love this quote. I think it perfectly sums up what I'd like to share. Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Okay, authenticity. An authentic person is one who is true to one's own spirit, personality, and character. There are 3 key tenets for embodying authenticity in your leadership capacity that I think all work together. Vulnerability. Recognize your own shortcomings. Be honest with yourself and with those that you lead. It's important to kind of break down those walls that we put up and hide our inner selves. We need to really figure out where we need to do the work. That's our core. Consistency. We cannot be different versions of ourselves depending on the setting or where we are. Hold true to your morals and your values. It will carry you so far if you can maintain your core no matter where you are. And then hold yourself accountable to that. That's accountability. Circle back to your vulnerability and open yourself up to correcting your behaviors and growing. All of this ties into relationship building. So you want to foster depth among your peers and those that you lead. Balance your foundation or your entire structure collapses. So this means that we apply those authenticity principles no matter where we are or who is around. You deviate from your core self in front of one group, your platform of who you are and who you want to become not just as a leader, but as a human, can crack and collapse. So it's important to really work on your core and know yourself. I would like to talk a little bit about what civility is not. Civility is claiming and caring for one's identity, needs, and beliefs without degrading someone else's in the process. It is not setting the tone. That is called tone policing. That is a personal attack and a tactic for criticizing a person for expressing emotion. It distracts and derails the discussion from the critical message that person was trying to convey. So we just want to be clear that tone policing is inappropriate behavior. We control our own expressions and emotions and rules for engagement, but we have no right to define those principles for other people. Civility is not making assumptions. We as a society, as some of you might be familiar with, are quick to judge based on appearance, based on tone, based on topic, based on our lived experiences. And when we do that, we really miss out on opportunities when we assume, opportunities to deepen our understandings, challenge our assumptions, create new lived experiences, foster connections, and grow. So it's important that we, in our building our principles, do the work to remove our biases. Civility is not proving a point. It is impossible to build common ground if you assume you already know the solution to a complex problem. If you listen to prove a point, then you miss what the person you've engaged with is trying to communicate. All of these are errors that can detract from your leadership, and you risk permanently damaging the relationships and alienating your allies and your supporters. So we've got some helpful tips, rules for engagement. Center authenticity, hold true to your morals and beliefs, and decenter yourself, your assumptions, your biases. Speak your whole truth. Recognize the importance of your lived experience and what you need and wish to share. Your truth and your message is important every single time. Your words matter. Value vulnerability. This one can sometimes be a little bit tricky for leaders, I think. But vulnerability is beautiful. It opens you up to a whole new world of depth and opportunity. Don't underestimate the gift of connecting with someone through your vulnerability. Stay open and engaged. Push back against internal biases in your flight or fight responses and challenge yourself to actively listen and experience the moment. Courage. Courage is the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. It takes courage to lead and engage with civility and authenticity. So how do we do that? How do we lead courageously? Well, open dialogue. Remove your preconceptions and assumptions and hold true to your authentic self. Actively listen. This is trust building. Continual practice and active listening fosters connection because people know that you actually value and hold dear what they're trying to share. And then key, maintain your civility principles, authenticity, vulnerability, honesty, integrity, and respect. It's like we pause. Here we go. Connect with respect. Okay, how do we move forward? How do we do that? It's a process and a skill. So dedicate the space, energy, and resources and give yourself grace to make mistakes. Build your stamina for open and honest communication and hold yourself accountable. It is no one else's job to do it for you. Value yourself enough to practice this. Expect and accept non-closure. This is hard for a lot of leaders as well. There is no perfect format for building common ground and engaging and leading with civility and courage. Remove the fallacy of perfection. It constrains you from actual growth. So the final thoughts I'd like to leave you with: have the courage and the fortitude to honor who you are no matter where you are, and engage in dialogue with others to raise all boats. thank you very much for your time. I have included my contact information in the future. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jamil.
Hey, everybody. This has been great. Thank you, Emily. I want to just set a few little easy ground rules that'll be in place. Everybody, listen as much as you want to listen. I'm not going to compel you to hear what we have to say, because that would be tone setting, and that's inappropriate behavior. So we don't want to do that. But we're going to talk this afternoon about flaw management and blind spots to success. As Emily said, I'm Jamil Muhammad. I'm a facilitator with Lifting as We Climb. And you find us right there at the addresses that are listed here, www.liftandclimb.org, or right there where you can actually contact us. Let's get right into what we're having to say this afternoon. I want to submit for your consideration this afternoon as leaders that building the beloved community from the beautiful mosaic takes fierce leadership. You may notice, if you're a student of recent history or if you're a news junkie like I am, that these two descriptive terms, the beloved community and the beautiful mosaic, come from two very interesting figures in American history. The beloved community is a concept advanced by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and the beautiful mosaic is a concept put forward by the former mayor of New York City, who just passed away a few months ago, the Honorable David Dinkins. The idea is to build out of the many one. Yes, e pluribus unum. And so it takes fierce leadership to do that. We're going to describe what fierce leadership is, and then we'll hear Dr. Howard Bostic come back at the end of the program and round out our understanding. But if we can go to the next slide, we can see that there are some failures that leave us open to blind spots that can hinder or delay our success. What the doctor said earlier was that we would talk about these blind spots, and we intend to by just talking about a few of them and starting our discussion. This can't be exhaustive, obviously, in the time frame that we have. Number one, a blind spot is the failure to grasp how others perceive us, our energy, and our potential contribution. Everybody walking in the door, coming straight out of the gate, or as my grandfather used to say, straight from the giddy up. Everybody has a way that people perceive them. We can't fail to grasp how people perceive us and work with those perceptions to produce optimal outcomes. Everything I'm saying today is about producing optimal outcomes. The second blind spot is the failure to learn the lessons of our own mistakes, or even to acknowledge that we make them. We know that we've been in an artificial atmosphere where nobody can even admit that they make a mistake. Whatever field of endeavor we're in, we have to hide our incompetencies. Not that we are incompetent, but we have areas of incompetence. We have to hide those incompetencies. We have to hide the weaknesses, hide, as Emily said, our vulnerability. And when we do that, we cannot learn the lessons that that vulnerability may teach us, making us a stronger leader and more fierce in our outcome. Third, the failure to guard against the twin demons. I call them the twin demons of mediocrity and complacency. Mediocrity, you don't have to strive for mediocrity. It's going to happen anyway. Mediocrity is the kind of thing that water seeks its own level and settles on the lowest plane. Mediocrity cannot allow us to excel, so we must dispel mediocrity. Complacency, being satisfied with what is. If we became satisfied with what is without creating what needs to be done, then we would fall victim to the disdain of history. I believe it was Robert Kennedy, or which one of the Kennedy brothers? Somebody will help me in the chat, who said some people look at what is or what's not and say why. I look at what isn't and say why not. Paraphrasing, but you get the idea. You have to allow that to come into your thinking. Number 4, a blind spot. Failure to rise above emotions into the thinking of a fierce leader. Ferocity does not involve anger. It does not involve anybody being so out of their mind with rage that they can't get anything done. That's furiousness. But ferocity involves the intensity of focus that allows a leader like you, and you all are leaders on this line, to actually achieve goals despite the inevitable. Thank you, that was Robert Kennedy. Thank you, Claudia. What would I be without you? Nothing. I'm telling you right now that the idea of you being fierce has to become a part of what you settle with. Am I fierce? Am I to be dealt with? Am I the real deal? Am I what's happening? Yes, I am. You got to believe that. And no amount of niggling, bothersome, political correctness can stop you from believing in yourself. You got to believe in yourself. And that belief in yourself allows you to rise above those emotions into the thinking of a fierce leader. Now, finally, on these blind spots, failure to recognize the limits of one versus the leverage of many. The limits of one, the leverage of many. Claudia, I'm going to check another quote, but I believe it was J. Paul Getty who said that he would rather, at the end of the day, have in his control and in his possession 1% of the output of 99 others than to have 100% of the output of himself. He understood that those 99 people working together, producing just a little bit for him to access, would be able to create a synergy and an energy that would move the entire operation forward. Individuality can be the death knell of success, particularly in a collective effort. Every effort that we make in education is collective. Our students are like diamonds, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. Next slide, please. How do we manage then the inevitable occurrence of flaws in all their forms? You know, a flaw is a mark. It's a fault or other imperfection that mars a substance or an object. When that happens, flaws, and they do come up in our organizational effort, expect them. Nothing in nature is perfect, not a single thing, not even the flawless diamond that we love so much. Nothing in nature is perfect and flawless. The earth is not perfectly mathematically spherical. The earth is oblong. It's true. Nothing in nature is flawless. And as much as we like to think that there are things which are flawless, there are things which are not flaw-free. Let's call them flawless, but they're not flaw-free. They're flawless, but not flaw-free. In our organizations, though, flaws can't exist. We can't allow them to exist. They will occur, but we have to allow them, we can't allow them rather, to become a permanent part of our organizational culture. As an individual, as a team, as an organization, we can't allow flaws to become a part of who we are. We then fall off the mountain of excellence, and we can't do that. We simply can't. So again, let's talk about excellence in point number 3. When you're dealing with a personal situation, a human resources situation, a coaching situation, a leadership situation where people, and everybody's a person, where people are involved, what we want to do is correct flaws in the strictest of confidence. If you see a person falling down, not completing their assignment, not in some way achieving the goal, you don't want to shout them out, hey, buddy, you over there at station number 3, what a terrible job you're doing, pal. You don't want to do that. You correct flaws in the strictest of confidence, because here at Lifting as We Climb, we are the culture. We don't do cancellation culture. We do correction. We don't do annulment. We do adjustment. There's a difference now, because the correction occurs in strict confidence, allowing the person to come back out and go higher and higher in their productivity. So then that gives us a chance to announce their excellence from the highest mountaintop. You can only imagine the resultant effect on morale and spirit in the collective team space. Number 4, learn to incorporate your flaws while they yet exist in your group. And I put in quotes there, play hurt. Some of you who are sports fans, you know that some of the greatest champions have always had to adjust to some type of injury that made them continue on in spite of the injury and yet achieve victory. We're not going to talk about Muhammad Ali and George Foreman over in Zaire, because that would be a diversion off into sports, and you guys would hate that kind of thing. So we won't talk about that. But the rope-a-dope was born out of a flaw. But Ali incorporated that flaw and used the flaw as a part of his strategy to succeed while the flaw was yet in place. We've got to do the same as individuals, in our teams, and in our organizations. Finally, let's make our flaw management a drawing card for excellence. How can that be, Jamil? That sounds crazy. Is that a contradiction in terms? Is that some kind of oxymoron here, buddy? No. Your flaw management is a drawing card for excellence, because the way that you handle the inevitable flaws, the way that you deal with the inevitable shortcomings in yourself, in your team, and in your organization is the kind of flexibility that creates a reputation for you as a fierce leader. And why shouldn't you be fierce? Why shouldn't you be the best? And why shouldn't you be primo, numero uno, if you will? You should be that. So let's conclude. Great organizations attract great people. Let's say it again. Great organizations attract great people. You know, we would never diverge from the subject matter to get off into sports or anything, because that would be a waste of time. But some of your blue chip players, they want to play for the New York Yankees because the Yankees got 26 or 27 world championships. They're a great organization, so they attract great players. Some people want to play for or work with or collaborate with those who have already shown their greatness as an organization, which is made up of great teams, which is made up of great individuals. Thus then, the beautiful community is built from the beautiful human mosaic under fierce leadership. The beautiful community built from the beautiful human mosaic under fierce leadership, And that's the thing that takes us to the top. I want to thank you all for taking the time to give me a few moments to talk without diverging into sports at all, because that would be a waste of your time and we wouldn't do that. But I want to thank you all for giving me this time. And you can find me right there at the address that's on top of the lifting and climbing slide there. And Dr. Howard Bostic reminds us that questions are welcome. So we open the floor in accordance with that direction. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat. Go right in the chat as you see fit. Or comments, that's right, that's right. Dr. Shaquita Howard Bostic, a real intellectual light and a jewel. I have to say that about you, Doctor, because to create something like this in this time of the pandemic, to use electronics to draw people together, and then to put forward such a brilliant program, we congratulate you in advance for the success of this program. Questions?
I have
comments?
a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
What did you all learn? What did you get out of the conversation? And how is it going to matter for you? Because now you've just taken your time at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. What did you
I think
gain?
that's a fully loaded question. What did we learn? I particularly like and I'm sorry, his name, I forgot that quick, but his perspective on looking for the what's not and asking the why not. The reverse to the quote, and that is kind of trying to reveal the things that are beneath the surface, which is super important for a leader or someone, in that position.
Okay.
I'd also like to add that I like the idea of embracing the failures and then learning from them and showing how we can better ourselves instead of kind of brushing them under the rug or canceling them out. I like the idea of using a failure to help others learn from it.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
I just want to interject. I have a question here in chat. How do you help a person see his or her flaws if he or she does not see them?
Interesting question. Emily, would you like to take a stab at it? I can follow up if you'd like.
Sure. I would say, so one of our philosophies at Lifting as We Climb is that we like to invite people in. So we are all about calling people in privately to a conversation, engaging with them to kind of help them. We are not about calling people out. We just don't think that's productive. So I would say try and engage with that person on an individual private level, because so many people have so many things going on. I mean, you and I are all so complex. So I would say start there. But Jamil, what would you add?
One thing I thought about, getting a person to recognize their faults is not a very easy thing to do. It's not in human nature for me to come to you and say, you know what, Emily, let me tell you what's wrong with you. It's not going to work. We have to establish a working empathetic relationship where the doors of blockage have been removed, allowing free transit of ideas from person to person. That allows for me to acknowledge that I have faults and to invite you to help me with mine while I covenant to help you with yours. And we do that in an environment of safety. We do that in an environment of confidentiality, so that the weaponization of my flaws is not something I have to worry about. Does that make sense? Hope it does.
Opportunity to bring in kind of your authenticity principles and to be vulnerable. Nothing helps people connect more than sharing your own flaws. So that's a really nice area for you to say, look, this is a place where I'm working too. Let's grow together.
There you go.
Talk about that.
Yep.
Hi, I think what's challenging sometimes in a professional space is when they use your flaws or your vulnerabilities against you, especially when you're the minority in the situation. How do you navigate?
Well, first thing I do is I call Al Sharp. No, I don't call Al Sharp. But you know what is, Elizabeth? I think it's important to assert oneself. I think I said at the top of my presentation that fierce leadership does not depend on you lowering yourself, canceling yourself, not being yourself. Authenticity, the Swahili word is kujichagulia, which determines, as one of the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, kujichagulia means self-determination. You have a right to determine yourself even within the context of the academy. And in determining yourself, you'll find a way to make that expression known. There'll be some people who fight you for being the minority, in quotes, all of your career. You can't do anything about their ignorance, but what you can increase is your own intelligence. And your own intelligence allows you to go with the ebb and flow and deal with those situations. I hope that shed a little bit of light on your question, Elizabeth. Was that something that helped a little bit?
Yes, thank you. I've just personally had a lot of negative experiences in the workplace. My name is Elizabeth Ann, and I'm a Black young woman and working on my doctorate. And sometimes even with me I always have to sandbag people that I'm sorry about my infant, but I have to sandbag people with the fact that I'm getting my doctorate. I'm a highly educated person. And even if I wasn't, I am here in this space and I'm owed respect just as I am giving it to you. And
we're losing audio. Elizabeth, I hope you can hear me, but sandbagging only becomes necessary when we ultimately value the opinion and perception of a person who has already told us they don't value us. That's optional. Some can determine not to do that. Some can bring the Brooklyn salute to a person like that. Y'all know the Brooklyn salute, right? It happens. But to assure good working relationships in the academy or in the professional world or in corporate America, or wherever you may be, the best thing to do is to assert yourself, because your excellence is the one thing that refutes the false ideas of supremacy in other people, whether it's educational supremacy, white supremacy, Black supremacy, any of that. If you excel, no one can defeat you. No one.
And I
that's
just
a
like to
whole
add,
word.
Yeah, it is. If it's okay, I just like to add to a true leader wouldn't do that. They wouldn't use those things against you. And so, their intentions aren't pure. And that may be someone who respect you don't necessarily want to have anyway.
Let me ask you this, Ms. Wright. Does anybody still remember the names of, and history? Now I'm talking about history, not religion, but does anybody remember the names of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the Sanhedrins? They don't remember their names. They weren't true leaders. They were attached to an old organization that was burning out. But the man who showed fierce leadership was their enemy, not because he set himself to be an enemy against them, but because they became his enemies.
Yeah.
Why? Because he believed in fierce leadership and he believed in doing something that would change the world. Now, he had to change his dinner invitation card because they had one supper with 12 guests and one of them wasn't nothing but a bum. But in all truth and reality, you remember the name of the fierce leader. You don't forget the people who are not real leaders.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a few more questions from chat. How do you suggest colleges and universities create policies and procedures that foster civility in campus environments inside and outside of the classroom?
Okay. Emily, as usual, start us off there.
All right. Well, I would say that's an excellent question. One thing I would say is that it's good to set some ground rules. So things like the rules for engagement that I talked about, incorporate those as a standard, and set your policies to actually value those. So it needs to be consistent. We don't just have a piece of paper where everyone signs and says, yeah, like, I'll be kind and I'll be respectful. Build it into the culture of your organization.
Right.
Invest in creating those spaces, invest in creating those behaviors, and then reward that when you start to get results. Jamil, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it's, and I'm going to take the prerogative of seniority. As I look around on the Zoom, I can see I'm the oldest and most decrepit person on this Zoom today. But I can tell you that there was a time when people at least showed the appearance of civility. The appearance of civility was reinforced in what we call societal norms, right? Or social suggestion. I'll give you an example of how society has unraveled and some of the things that we might be able to do to put it back together, even in policies on colleges and universities. Because you all are the policy makers, you're the legislators. I'm just an old guy who's been around the block a few times, right? And Sister Christina Hickens nodding her head like, yes, you are old, you are a pretty old guy. But let me tell you, in the old days, you used to turn on your radio and you would hear Sam Cooke singing, darling, you who send me, darling, you who send me. And he talked about it. First, I thought it was infatuation, but it lasted so long. Now I find myself wanting to marry you and take you home. That was the social cue. That was the norm. That was what was in the ears of children riding in the car with their parents, listening to the radio as they drove through the country. They listened and they heard that and they began to ascribe to that, to aspire to that. Nowadays, you turn on the radio, the cultural cues are all out of whack. Everybody's doing everything different all the time. I'm not saying anybody's better or worse, but the dissolution and the crumbling of the social institutions in society have contributed to these problems on colleges and university campuses. How do these campuses build that back? They make it clear that they will not tolerate any person, regardless of their diversity or difference, being set upon with prejudicial and bigoted activity and wrong behavior. I'm telling you. See, Emily and I represent three groups of people that used to have a really tough time in West Virginia. That is Blacks, that's women, and it's Ohioans trying to do any damn thing in West Virginia, because we're from Ohio, both she and I. So yes. It's tough, you know? So let's open up the doors and start. Ohio, go ahead, Monica. Woo, Ohio. So we're doing the things that are doing the right answer. That's what we need to do, okay? Any other questions in there?
We have another question. Yes. Do you think it's possible to enter into a civil or successful conversation without mutual agreement on civility and listening?
All right, I'm going to start. I think that you define what success is. And so if you define what a successful conversation looks like, then yes, every time, because you define how you engage, you define what you want out of that interaction, and you define when that interaction ends. So if they're not meeting the standard that you've set for how you're willing to engage, it's okay to put a pause on a conversation. It's better to put a pause, right? And to center yourself than to spiral down a path that you don't want to be on. What do you think, Jamil?
That's the way I would look at it. In the old school way, you know, we would just pause the conversation and look at the person and ask, well, who you think you're talking to? See, it's a simple way to pause the conversation. Like, nah, dude, you got me twisted. Or as they say on the other side of town, newsflash, buddy. Okay. See, it would be different ways to handle that and make sure that people, you own the right to your own respect. And nobody at all is allowed to treat you in a way that shows you disdain and disrespect, and then claim to be a part of a diverse and fair and righteous and fiercely led community. You can't do that. You got to decide, what are you going to do? Yes, that's right, Sarah. You own the right to your own respect. Okay?
That's power.
Rodney Dangerfield teaches us that.
All right, I think I got a message that we're supposed to be, Jamil and I are leaving you. And
Okay.
Yes. Bye, y'all. It was wonderful. Get out.
Bye,
We will see you
Go to
later.
the next group and give this amazing talk again. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Are y'all ready
Bye.
for the next set of speakers?
All right.
Bye, Brother Jamil. I'm so excited for everybody. Thank y'all for being here. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's looking all beautiful. That's so exciting. All right, enjoy. I'm trying to see who's coming in.
Can somebody quick tell me how to change my name?
Who said that? Oh, you
Me.
don't want to be Jimmy O'Chin?
Ji Yang Chong.
If you just,
I got you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Let me see. All right. Be patient for 1 second. The other group will be coming right in for you. Just take just a few minutes to breathe and break, and the next speakers will be here for you in just a second. No worries. It's good to take a break anyway. Breathe.
In the meantime, that was beautiful and powerful, and thank you.
That's coming. We're just waiting. We're trying to do something new with the breakout sessions and different links, you know? I wonder what happens the second time someone gives their talk. I wonder if it's better or what. I guess you're going to see. Oh. All right.
Did you see the question in chat that someone asked, will slides from all these presentations be posted anywhere?
Yes, the diversity and equity webpage, the same site where we had all of the information about the different workshops, the video links for all of the workshops, all the PowerPoints, and the videos from this will be available there for you all. But you know, give us a couple days to get it, you know, to get everything together. But if people are enrolled in the diversity and equity course, all of that information will be in Sakai in the lessons link. You'll have access to all of this information. So we'll make sure that everybody gets everything. I think for the PowerPoints, I'll put them as a Google Drive link so that you can go ahead and access the document and then use the information for whatever presentations you might want to give in the future or whatever. We'll make sure that you can edit it and use the information for whatever you all need to do as leaders. All right. Is Hakeem in here yet? All right, I'm going to the other link and find them. I'm going to see what they're doing. I'll be right back.
I see some fabulous people that I know from Shepherd and Martinsburg, and I don't have my screen on, but I just wanted to say, you all look wonderful. And even the people that I don't know, hello, everyone.
Hi, it's good to hear your voice.
Yours too. I'm so excited that you guys did this. I'm like, I wish this was going on when I was a student, when I worked there briefly. I want to take this event and put it to all of my former employers, like Loudoun County and Berkeley County. I'm like, they need this. This is just excellent. I think it's fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. We are going to have recordings. We're putting everything on YouTube, so I can send you the links.
Oh, I would appreciate that. I have friends who are teaching out in Loudoun County, and this would be very beneficial for them. So thank you.
Our speakers did join. I'm just trying to find them. Oh, I'm going to make you all co-hosts. All right, thank you. I think we're starting with Hakeem, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm sorry, who was that was that you, Annie?
Yes, it was me.
Okay, I've actually got, I got two devices on here, so I don't know if you can see, there's another one that says Hakeem Leonard. It's just a blank screen, but I want to share my screen from that one.
From that one, okay.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I find it here. Oh, yeah, I see it. There you go.
All right, thank you so much. It's good to be here with everybody. I'm not gonna belabor the point, but so I want to definitely leave time for Nadira, so I'm gonna get right into it. Sharing my screen here. Okay, so we're gonna talk about transformative empathy and unsettling dominant definitions of inclusion and belonging. So these are gonna kind of run together a little bit. And I'm gonna start by saying empathy can transform and be transformative when we understand it from the place of belonging. And you see this point here, unsettling a dominant conception of inclusion. And so this next kind of phrase is what I would think is a dominant narrative of inclusion. So it says, we value the ability of all people in our community to thrive and contribute regardless of difference. So the problem with this statement is pretty much the regardless of difference part. Because if you can visualize it, I visualize this as somebody who's standing at the center, who's always been included, who gets to define inclusion. They're saying, hey, we don't have to change. Y'all just come be a part of us, whatever we are, y'all come be a part of that. And, we don't even really have to engage with what's different about you. Just come be part of the center, and so this is actually it's really a non-discrimination statement, if you will. It doesn't empower us to engage and embrace difference. It empowers us maybe to be non-discriminatory, but that doesn't get us far, okay? And so we're starting there, and this is a picture of Eartha Kitt. Some of you may know, a famous actress, entertainer. I'll talk a little bit more later about why I have a picture of Eartha Kitt, why this is important. But this idea of belonging to ourselves, Black women, people of color have had to reckon with how do I, not just belonging to how do I belong to myself? And so this is connected to this idea of embodiment. I'm not going to give you a technical definition of embodiment, but I'm going to give you kind of just my layman's terms here. And that is a congruence between our internal feelings, our internal world, and ourselves in the external, in the world. You can also talk about this connection between the mind and the body, and that we feel a congruence in that. And we know that in Western society, there has been this kind of dichotomy between the mind and the body, right? And there's just this dominance of a logical based worldview. And then the contrast, this opposite side of the coin, to be separated from an experience of being wholehearted or feeling whole within yourself and your body. And so just want to establish our conversation in, first of all, that dominant view of inclusion, and how now we're talking about the importance of people of color having belonging to themselves. So this idea of disembodiment in the cultural discourse, really one of the roots of that is this idea of double consciousness by W.E.B. Du Bois in The Souls of Black Folk in 1903, in which he says, I'm trying to live as an American and I'm trying to live as a Black man, and this world will not let me be fully Black and be fully American. And so I'm always in this battle between how do I belong, and I'm the way in which the world is set up causes me to be disembodied. And so how do I even belong to myself? Fast forward to 1977, the Combahee River Collective. So this was a group of Black lesbian women, and they're building on this idea of double consciousness, but they're saying, you know what, we have been marginalized by the white feminist movement over here, and we've been marginalized by the Black civil rights movement over here. And so we're feeling this kind of disembodiment, and it's almost like we have to name ourselves, because there's no place that has a name on it that says, here's where you belong, here's where you belong. So we have to take up our own space. We have to name ourselves. We have to fully embody ourselves. We have to understand who we are, and we have to decide what is the terms for our belonging, if you will. And so in a sense, you see this in a lot of the literature about Black women saying we had to remember ourselves or put ourselves back together. And so what I'm trying to do is establish because they didn't stand at the center, they had to come up with their own belonging, and that belonging should shape how we shape belonging in our institutions and in our courses and what have you. And so here's two ideas. Of course, we all are probably familiar with the golden rule, which says value people as you value yourself, or love people as you love yourself. But what happens when you try to teach empathy from this place, from a place of privilege where somebody's always stood at the center, and you're telling them to value other people who have not stood at the center? So how can they even value those people? And so this from the center, many times they're just saying, hey, I know how to love, it's just more like, I know how to love. I'm just going to love you as I love myself. And then it's kind of more rooted in sentimentality. Now, the platinum rule, something coined by intercultural researcher Dr. Milton Bennett, it says, actually, we need to shift that to love people as they love themselves, value people as they value themselves. And so the question becomes, what happens when we teach empathy from a place of those who have had to remember themselves, of those who have had to struggle with belonging, and then see what that is? And this type of way in which if we go from empathy from this place, we don't say this assertion, I know how to love. It leads us to curiosity. It says, how do I love? Because that love is not rooted in me connecting you to who I am. That is rooted in me trying to get to know your differences. And so this type of way, this intersectional way of empathy leads us to a true empathy and to a curiosity in the way that we have our belonging. And so, just to piggyback on that last point, when we talked about how that initial definition of belonging was somebody who was standing at the center. And so, somebody who might have been socialized into a dominant gaze. And so that narrative is if I'm standing at the center I'm standing at the center as the reference point, the definition of normal. My view gets to shape the definition of your belonging. My value grows. Your value grows as I recognize it and view it. So that's how we've been actually doing this thing of inclusion. That's how we've actually been defining it. But the dominant gaze cannot embody empathy without using itself as a reference point. And so that's the idea that we're having to decenter that. So I kind of want to piggyback with this point. People who have had to kind of be on the margins, who have had to remember themselves, where they were vulnerable and resilient, it's led to inner work. It's led to transformative healing. They've had to take up their own space. They've had to name themselves. If you want to connect it to this idea from critical race theory, we have to center in the margins. And so if you imagine people who have always been at the center and their stories dominate our sense of belonging, but we actually need to bring in the people who have been at the margins and people who have actually had to struggle to belong to shape that. So one of the things I want to share with you, I'm gonna play a song for 1 minute. This is a song by Jamila Woods, and Jamila Woods, one of her last albums, she connects with the stories of other historical people. And so this song is called Eartha, and she's connecting to the story of Eartha Kitt. There was a famous quote by Eartha Kitt in which they said, if a man comes into your life, are you willing to compromise? And she said, compromise? I don't see the reason for compromise. I'm here loving myself. And if somebody wants to come share my love with me, share as I love myself and share that, then that's how that'll be. And so as Jamila's singing about this, she has a refrain that says, who's gonna share my love with me? Who's gonna share my love for me with me? So let's just
out in bed, gaslight in my head, but I said what I said. I don't wanna compromise. Can we make it through the night? I'm trying to see eye to eye, but you look right over me. Your words stuck on repeat, and I'm tired of your shit.
Okay, so I just wanted you to even talk, as Milton Bennett says, this is the platinum rule. I want you to recognize that what he has taught us through kind of this scholarly way, Black women have known in this embodied way, And so empathy says, I will share your value for yourself with you. And so empathy really empowers us to embrace difference from this intersectional lens. So I kind of end with a quote from Audre Lorde, who was one of the members of the Combahee River Collective. And this quote will give you this sense of how because she had to name herself in this way, it serves to really give us a better sense of empathy and belonging. And so it says, those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition of acceptable women, those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbians, who are Black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. For the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. And so as we're talking today, our kind of thesis point is that the way in which we've been defining and trying to go about inclusion has been reinforcing the master's house, if you will. And so this kind of definition from this intersectional place really empowers curiosity and really empowers empathy in a way that can drive change. And so the last just conclusion, unsettling dominant definitions of belonging is very important. Black people, especially Black women and other BIPOC people, have had to remember themselves, put themselves back together, name themselves. Empathy is rooted in valuing somebody else's love and value for themselves. Empathy is rooted in valuing differences, not similarities. And the final point, empathy and curiosity are now needed more than ever. So hopefully that gave you just some thoughts to ponder on, to be curious about, and love to hear from you more with questions later.
All right, let me make sure I am unmuted. Okay, I am. Well, thank you so much for that, Hakeem, Dr. Leonard. We appreciate that and for what you shared with us about empathy. And I think you will find that it ties in nicely to what we're going to talk about regarding cultural responsiveness. So I'm going to hop right into it. I'm an educator by background, so I like for us to just talk about the objectives and where we're going a little bit. So we are going to talk about self-reflection. We're going to talk about ways to communicate as a means for building upon our cultural competence, and then just thinking about how to do that with consistency, genuineness, authenticity, honesty towards others so that we can have great communication. So first things first, I just want to say thank you. I know that many of you could be other places tonight, but I believe in making sure that people know that their time is appreciated and that what you are doing, the work that you do for diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice is very important. So thank you for that. Also, just want to thank Dr. Howard Bostic for the opportunity to be with you. And I've heard great things about all the things that have taken place in the previous sessions and in this course. So just want to make sure that you know that you're appreciated. I also just want to say sort of a disclaimer. If any of this information seems very basic to you, I apologize. I know that there's a wide range of knowledge in the virtual room with us tonight. Some of you are students, some of you are faculty and administrators, staff, community members. So I know our range varies. So I just want to say thank you for bearing with me if this seems basic, but I think it's important, especially in today's time, for us to go back to the basics and sort of talk about some of those fundamental things as it relates to communication and cultural competence. So thank you for that. And then I want to just sort of start us off with a poem because that's the way that I communicate best sometimes. And so for you tonight, hi, my name is Nadira. Hi, my name is Nadira. Nadira, yep, that's my name. 3 syllables, 7 letters, but people mess it up 10 times just the same. I get called Nadidra, Nadira, Nadria, Ladira, and even Madir. So let me sound it out for you to hear. It's na, dear, Think dear, put na at the beginning and at the end. Yeah, Nadira, you got it, my friend. See, my name means precious, unique, rare. Sandra and Anthony, my parents, they actually chose it with great care. So it's not that I'm vain, and I won't judge you if your pronunciation is unintentionally incorrect. I just ask that you try to pronounce it correctly because it's actually one of the highest forms of respect. It was given to me at birth, and it will be with me long beyond this life. So when you speak it into the atmosphere, I'd like for you to try to say it right. A name is a declaration spoken at least 3 times a day. So multiply that times 70 years, and that's 76,650 times that I get to hear you or somebody say that I am precious and unique. My reminder, my affirmation. So think about that when you attempt the pronunciation. I'm a cisgendered woman. My pronouns are her and she. I am Black mixed with Black, and my hair type is all kinds of 4C. I'm married to a handsome king, 10 years in July. Blessed upon blessed upon blessed. One look at them and you'll see why. 2 precious boys, so thankful to have carried them and to have seen them been born. One unborn baby lost in between them, my heart still mending from being torn. I'm a Detroit native, but I was raised in the GA, a Motown peach, if you will, in the countries where I stay. On some Sundays, you can catch me out in a pew, hands raised and singing loud. But my best communion with the Almighty comes in quiet times, digging in the dirt away from the crowd. I often question, though, still the who, what, why, where, when, and how, seeking to know what life and all of this is all about. Some of that is probably just my liberal arts background coming out. Frequently, I am dancing or writing in one of the 700 planners I've acquired or created. I love pound cake poems and planner supplies. Nature gets me inspired. I am flawed, often pensive and insecure, sometimes defensive, but always loving, seeking evermore to be pure. I'm an educator by trade and passion, and a DEI warrior, semi-neophyte by day, a mom-made cook, Hot Wheels connoisseur, and laundry guru at the House of May. This is me, growing, learning, changing, evolving, communicating, but just trying to keep it sane. I'm Nadira. Yep, Nadira. That's how you say my name. So I just wanted to start with that just because names are important. And when we're talking about cultural competence and communication, one of the main things, if you don't take anything away, is going to be your language choice, your word choice, and how you call other people by what they want to be called and their names. So I just want you to take that away, that's key, and it's a cornerstone in communication when talking about cultural competence. So again, I know some of this is very basic. Many of you already know what culture is. You have multiple definitions and theories about it. And this is just one of the in-depth definitions that I found, but the key takeaway from this one is that it's the deposits of knowledge and all other aspects of life acquired by a group of people over generations. It's social learning. So the key to this is that it's passed along by communication. And I think it's important to highlight that communication because if culture is passed along by communication, then it's important for us to think upon, reflect upon, be intentional about the way that we communicate with others, especially those that have cultural or identity differences than our own. And when you do those things, it can lead to cultural competence. So when we say cultural competence, we're just looking at, our ability to assess our biases, our experiences, all of the different things that shape us and how we view the world. And then it allows us to look at, do we know the lens that we see the world with, or that we view the world with, or comprehend the world with? And ask ourselves, how much do we know about ourselves and about others? That part between ourselves and others is very important. We have to know ourselves before we can know others. And then how do we apply that awareness of self and others? All of those things lead to our cultural competence. But it's important to remember that all of this takes time. You're ever growing. It's an ever growing journey. We're not going to know all the things right away. So it's important to be patient with yourself. Many of you probably have already crafted your own definitions of cultural competence. So if you're looking at me like, Nadira, I got it. Okay, again, I'm telling you, this is just the basics. So we got to get this down first. The other thing that's important for us to remember is that we do have to go back to the basics. So tonight, I just want to talk a little bit about language, how we choose the words that we use, how we listen to other people. Are we being active? Because that's a form of showing that we care. And then love, which is the unifying language between all of us, despite all of our, in celebration of all of our identities and the different things that make us unique. love is the one common thread. And so in order to share that love with others, we first have to introspectively look at ourselves. So let's talk about choosing. You have to be intentional with your word choice. I know that there are varying levels and professions on the virtual room tonight, and many of you are responsible for the content and the messaging that you share in your arenas or your spheres of influence. So because you have the ability to look at and to edit that content or the words that come out of your mouth before you share them, it's important to be intentional about it. So ask yourself, are you using inclusive language? Are you staying away from things that would cater to the center, as Dr. Leonard pointed out? Are you looking at the margins? Are you redefining what that is and making sure that you're being more inclusive? Can multiple cultures and identities be seen in the information that you're sharing out or in the words that you're saying? And when I say, can everyone see themselves, I don't mean your physical ability to see, because we are paying attention to mixed abilities, right? But I mean, metaphorically, can people see? Are people represented in the things that you're sharing, the content that you're sharing? Is it accessible for varying levels of ability? All of these things are things that you need to think about when choosing your words in talking and communicating, but also in the print and the messaging that you're sending out from your area. And then if you mess up, be honest and open to admit it and then correct it, right? Always be willing to have other eyes look over it and say, you might not have sent that message out appropriately. Maybe you need to try again, or at least admit that you weren't being as inclusive as you should the first time that you sent it out. The next thing is word usage. So that's where the names are important and where it comes in to ask people, what do they prefer to be called? What are your pronouns? How would you like to be addressed? Not just assuming when you read a person's name or look at a person that you know that how they want to be addressed. And it sounds basic, but I cannot tell you how many times it's been messed up on so many different levels. So please just ask for clarification, verify that you know how a person wants to be called and how they want to be addressed, because that's the highest form of respect. And then also think about what you're not saying. What is your body language saying when you're communicating with others? Are there nonverbal communication signals in certain cultures that you're unaware of that you need to research and look up so that you understand how that message may be perceived by others? And then there's a text that we use here for our bridge program called On Course by Skip Downing that just sort of talks about some of the things that you can do to respect cultural differences. So those are listed here, and we've addressed a few of those already. And then when you're using and choosing words, it's also important to show that you care, and that's that next L, that's the listening. And I don't just mean hearing what a person says, but actively listening. So making sure that you're asking clarifying questions to engage, making sure that your mind is clear and that you're remaining silent when the other person is talking. I know sometimes I'm very guilty of already formulating in my mind what I'm going to say before the next person has a chance to say anything, or just making assumptions that you already know where that person is coming from because you've dealt with someone that was of a similar identity. Never make assumptions, always just open to hear that individual's person's story, experience, so that you can get it correct. Maya Angelou has said, I've learned that people will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So after all of this, after you've taken great care to listen and to use and to choose your words correctly, at the end of the day, what's important, especially where cultural competence comes into play, is that when people walk away, they feel respected and they know that you care and that you're making a valiant effort to try. And then that last component, the loving or sharing component, just has to deal with you loving yourself as well as you loving others. But you can't do that if you don't have a sense of authenticity and honesty. So it's very important for you to do some self-introspection. What is your story? Do you know you? Do you love you? What are the experiences or layers of diversity that apply to you? What are the lenses that you see the world through? If you're not in the habit of doing frequent self-reflection, it's important for us to get into it as a practice so that we're constantly assessing where we are, we know what our blinders are, and that we can ask ourselves, what are some things that I need to learn more about or get more information on? And then just looking at that learning and that loving of yourself. What are all the aspects of you, right? Before you can learn and love other people, you have to know what are the lenses that you view the world through. And those lenses run very deep. Sometimes we don't want to address them depending on what's under that level of the iceberg, but you have to be authentic and you have to be honest about who you are and what your blinders are before you can celebrate and appreciate the rich diversity that other people have to bring to the table. And then I know that Dr. Howard Bostic shared with us that many of you are educators, and so I just wanted to touch a little bit on culturally responsive teaching. So taking all of this language choice and this love and sharing and the listening into the classroom is important, and it all relates to culturally responsive teaching, which you may have heard referred to as CRT. And that's where essentially you're thinking about everyone when you're presenting or preparing the pedagogy or way of thought that you have when creating a lesson or preparing your classroom, your physical space, your mental dialogue and the language that you share. So just make sure that there's representation of everyone that's represented in what you do. Include students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. It's very important. And ways that you can do that is thinking about the positive perspective on parents and families, making sure that, as Dr. Leonard shared, bringing the margins in, and that you're celebrating that, and that it's no longer at the margins, that the margins are now at the center, and that it's student-centered instruction, and that you're a facilitator, not just this person who is privileged and has information to share, but that students are engaged in that learning and that sharing. And then for those of you that are at the higher ed level, there's a model called the tri-sector practitioners model that just talks about community building and outreach, the foundation of those relationships and the way you look at your programming. But it also just talks about your physical spaces, so things that you can do to create cultural centers that are inclusive, and that's included here. So I would encourage you on your own time to look up culturally responsive teaching and to look up the tri-sector practitioners model, because again, we don't have a ton of time to go into that, but I just wanted to mention that because I know that there are educators and higher ed professionals on the virtual platform tonight. So just wanted to say thank you again for your time tonight. Here are the resources, and do remember, names are important. Utilize names appropriately. And hi, my name is Nadira. Thank you for knowing my name.
Can you start all over from the beginning, please? That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Anybody want to put any questions in the chat or unmute and engage with some questions? So we have one question. How do you encourage curiosity and empathy in others?
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so one of the ways I actually use inclusive pedagogical tools. There's a tool called Mapping Your Role in a Social Justice Ecosystem by Deepa Iyer. And so this was a class that I taught called Social Justice in Music. And we asked some very explicit questions like, this was around Breonna Taylor's verdict. And so you may not ask these explicit questions, but I think you can still use this tool. One of our questions as a class was, what needs to change so somebody like Breonna Taylor can live? And so when this tool allowed them to connect to, in the tool it says, okay, my role might be a caregiver, or I'm a storyteller, or I'm a bridge builder, or I'm a disruptor. And so we had students say, well, here's what in my own life, not even thinking about justice, because they may not even do justice stuff. In my own life, I feel like I'm a caregiver, or I'm this, or I'm that. I've done this, I've done that. Okay, well, now let's bring that to this question, and let's come to it with curiosity and with empathy and say, okay, here's something within myself that I can play a role in doing this, And so how could we love Black women more? Or how would you love Breonna Taylor's, how would you comfort somebody's mother if you knew them? How would you disrupt this or do that? So I think the curiosity is important, but students have to connect it to something within they have to have an entry point. And we have to say, we're doing this together as a class. We're defining our outcomes, and everybody has to contribute to it.
Thank you. think we had another question. Trisha had asked, what were those 2 things you recommended educators look more into at the end? Nadira.
Yes, and I'm going to type it in here. It was culturally responsive teaching, which is acronymed CRT, and then the tri-sector practitioners model were the 2 things. So CRT and then the tri-sector practitioners model.
All right, we're winding down to the end of our breakout sessions here. Are there any last questions before we move back to the main session? And I'm going to paste that that link into the chat so that you know how to get back to the main session. Any last questions? Thank you so much, Nadira and Hakeem, and we will see everybody back at the main session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.